Hi, I'm Brent Sopel from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Growing up, my favorite player, Chris Chelios.
Down, Sopel scores! Off the face-off, Brent Sopel has blasted one.
Brent Sopel steps right into him.
Brent Sopel! Et le Canadien mène 1-0.
Oh my, Sopel just steps out of the penalty box and just lets him have it right there with his shoulder.
Kutcher nailed! Sopel came out of the penalty box.
Saw the opening and he found it. And the Canadians have the first goal of this game.
Fires one towards the goal. That's going to be gloved by Travis Ridgen. Well, this is more like it.
This is Slangin' the Biscuit. Here's Travis Ridgen and Dave Wheeler.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our summer interview series. Today's guest has played over 600 NHL games, 200 points, holding down the back end for the Chicago Blackhawks in their 2010 Stanley Cup victory. He hails from Paris of the Prairies outside the beautiful Bessborough Hotel, me and Dave's favorite city in all of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. He is not the lead singer of Shinedown. Don't let the video version of the show fool you. His name is Brent Sopel, not Brent Smith. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, that was tremendous.
You know who Brent Smith is?
Double A plus on that intro. Love it.
By the way, your eyes lit up when we said the Bessborough. We spent some time there last summer. Man, I love that hotel.
Well, that was the old underage drinking spot back in my day. And when I meant underage, I was about 13 or 14 underage.
You want to call a 9-year-old with a 35-year-old girlfriend troubled?
Well, you know, what else did I do in Saskatchewan? Like, I think it was, what, minus 67 last week. That's Celsius, folks, for all you Canadians out there with the wind chill.
But for the record, I thought the whole border of Saskatchewan was basically Saskatchewan translates to underage drinking.
Oh, 100%. Again, when it's minus 50, what else is there to do?
So, have you ever gotten that before? That you look like Brent Smith of Shinedown, in all seriousness?
No, that's the first time I've ever gotten it.
What about Ashton and Kutcher?
I got that one. I've gotten that a few times. That one got me across the border a few times.
A couple free meals out of that one.
Stanley Cup and, you know, an Ashton Kutcher pitcher got me across a few times.
That's a great spot to start, man. I got to ask you, that cup run that you guys went on, I mean, just Andrew Ladd, Dustin Byfuglien, Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, Brent Sopel. I mean, walk me through that cup run.
Well, you know, it's that team. I think the NHL, NHL.com did a segment of top 20 teams of all time. I think we fell in, you know, 8th, 9th, 10th. Yeah, like you said, those names that you mentioned. I'm the last man on the D-man list, but we are our third line. You know, Ladd, Versteeg, and Poland could have been anybody's top line. You know, yeah. Our depth was, but we didn't win because of that. It was when we came together as a group. It was the tightest knit team that I've ever been a part of. Pro 18 years. That was the one team where we cared about each other more than anywhere else, any other team that I've been a part of.
Do you have any examples that come to mind to kind of paint that picture for anybody listening? Like what makes a team that tight and that connected? Well,
you go through ups and downs. Like, you know, for us, we started exhibition in Switzerland. So I think we had 2 games in Switzerland, opened the season in Finland against Florida, you know, and came back. We'd do dinners together. There was times where we weren't playing well, and people had personal things going on in the team, but we were all there for each other. You can tell when somebody wants a point night or somebody cares about winning, taking that extra hit. So you look at a lot of teams nowadays, you know, who wants the fancy goal? Who wants my name? You know, I always say playing for the name on the back and not the name in the front. And that was probably the one year where it was probably the biggest and most evident that we all played for the name on the front, not the name on the back.
I heard a story recently from a very reliable source. I don't know if there's any truth to this. Any truth that Patty Kane was dicing up Taylor Swift?
Oh, you know, they did have some conversations. Yes, I don't know how far. I think they dated for a short period of time.
Well, the story that I heard was actually from Denny Savard's mouth.
Revealing my source.
Yeah. Well, it's from Denny talking about how Denny had this rule was like all the boys on the bus, and then they called Denny, and he's like, okay, now I'll get on the bus, and then he's about to get on the bus, and he still sees Kaner over on the side, and he's chatting up these 2 blondes, and so he yells at him, says a few choice words, says get on the bus. And then he talks to him after, and he's like, hey, coach, just so you know, that girl I was talking to was Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Never heard of her.
First off, I didn't know who Taylor Swift is then. Still don't want to know who she is now. And and Savvy was, 55 years old. So that wasn't, rules are rules, boys. It doesn't matter. Girls don't come into play, right? There's a rule, and if you don't abide by it, that's the way this works.
I guess he just had to shake that one off.
Ooh. I don't know. That's pretty peak. I mean, I take a prime Patty Kane over Travis Kelce any day of the week.
Football's not even, it's not a sport.
Pastime.
What I play, was a total running game like 10 minutes?
When the ball actually moving, I think it's less than that.
It's 10 seconds. They order in the huddle, order some cheese pizza together. No, but serious. Me and my dyslexic, they sit there and spend 15 minutes in the huddle. Blue 42, 65, handoff, flip down. You already lost me when you started. So it's impressive how they can remember the plays. I'll say that.
Okay, well, run me through this. Okay, so you've been very open about your dyslexia. I mean, when they're putting X's and O's on the board and they're running through practice, I mean, how are you able to quantify that and actually show up and be able to pull it off?
In school, hey, Sam drove 10 miles. I got no idea where Sam is. You need to show me. So thank God we had, whiteboards. Obviously, in hockey, there's only so many plays you can do. There's no way in God's green earth I could play football. First off, I'm as slow as shit, so that wouldn't work. But it was, 1, 2, 2. You draw it on the board where we're going, or we watch video. So I had to see it all. I couldn't hear it all. I had to see it all, and I think you'll appreciate this. I think I've never taken a pregame nap in 18 years pro hockey.
Interesting.
Because I wanted to go into the game exhausted. The more exhausted I was going into the game, the less my dyslexia and my ADHD work. I could play hockey and not instead of thinking hockey.
Wow. I've never really tried to figure out that equation, but that makes a lot of sense.
And that, and I didn't actually, funny thing is I didn't put that together until about 2 years ago. So I was doing this, like we're in Anaheim, I'd go to Disneyland, ride the rides, or go to mall shopping. Saturday was college football, so I'd stay at the hotel, but I never had a roommate. Nobody wanted a room with me. Everybody wanted to take the pregame nap, taking the meal and firing back to the bed, in the wrapper. And I'm going shopping, or I'm walking around, or sitting in the lobby, or, standing at the rink as long as I could because I wanted to be exhausted.
Wow. Do you think could that be a warning sign for anybody out there if they're kind of like thinking that way, like, hey, I want to be exhausted going into the game, is maybe something to look inwards on?
Well, for sure. The foundation, dyslexia is the second most common thing in the world next to cancer. So it's 1 in 5 in hereditary. So think how many teammates you had.
Right.
And I always say, remember the drill busters? Those drill busters had ADHD for sure. Yeah. That's why they busted the drills, because they couldn't process the drill the whole thing. So if you go back, and that's what I'm trying to bring, awareness in the, in the sporting world and hockey world is, the number one contributor to mental health is learning disorders.
Yeah.
For anybody that doesn't know, what exactly is dyslexia?
Explain it to me backwards.
Like, pretend I'm an idiot. What is it?
You want me to open that one? You want me to walk through that door? No, so dyslexia is, we're born with our brain wired differently. So normal people, as I always say, you guys read with your left. We read with our right. So for me, everybody just thinks it's flipping your B's and D's, but it's not. The most severe people will never read a word ever, because all the letters are moving around, jumping around. But for me, I can look at something. I can't, we can't, anything's silent. We can't remember. I can't retain what I remember. I can't remember names. Lefts and rights. Most dyslexics don't know lefts and rights. A lot of us can't tie our shoelaces. It's because our brain is wired differently. So think of, I start reading here on the right, and kind of goes up and hits in the middle, and think of a bowl of spaghetti. That's our wiring of our brain. And you guys stay over here on the left side of brain, and you guys can read.
So I'm guessing in the sitting there at center ice, coach has got the whiteboard up. You're down on one knee. You're staring. Nothing of it's really registering. Just realizing I'm just going to make sure I go to the back of the line, watch how it works a few times, and go from there.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is no self-esteem. Zero self-esteem. You talk about getting beat, because think how many times a day you read. Try struggling every time. I remember throwing a desk at a kid in grade 3. No, grade 3 should be, should be out on the playground, slide playing tag. But I was pissed off a kid throwing a desk. So that's how far back, my anger and, the PTSD and the hurt comes from. So then, the crazy part is I want a Stanley Cup. But that was the most amazing, emptiest feeling I've ever had in my life.
How so?
Because I didn't connect with one of my teammates. The first human I ever connected with was 2 years ago.
I'm hoping that's your wife.
Well, I met my wife after. She's a second. So I got my own podcast, for dyslexia and stuff. But it took me 46 years to connect to a human.
What would have been in your case, not anybody else, but in your case, what would have been the trigger to have that happen 40 years earlier?
It probably wouldn't have been well, first off, you got to get diagnosed. So I didn't find out I was dyslexic until I was 32. So I was reading at grade 4 level in high school. So I got a high school degree, because they passed me, right? So you're going to play hockey. So they just passed me along. So first you got to know what it is. I was told I'm dumb, stupid, and lazy my whole life. And still to this day, every day I wake up, I think I'm dumb. You tell a high school girl for 4 years she's fat every day, she believes it. And I was told that for 32 years, so I believe it. It's not something that you just can go in a race. It's that, and it's that easy. So first off, you have to understand, get diagnosed and understand what it is to be able to answer your question. Then I could have pieced things together. I just thought I was dumb my whole life.
So are you able to go back and dissect all those moments and go, that was it, that was it, that was it?
Yeah. I've been sober 8.5 years now. September 1st, if I make it there, will be 9 years.
Congratulations.
That's when I had to go back. I tried to kill myself with all the drugs and alcohol I was doing after hockey. To sober up, you got to go back and be okay with your past, what that new path is. And that's kind of what you just said. I'm like, okay, that's what that was. Okay, I understand it now. Now I can move on to the next issue. And I got many issues. I still got millions of issues to go, but that was my main issue in my life.
Well, in saying that, being able to go back and reflect and being able to recognize it, does that also come with forgiveness?
You have to, you have to forgive everybody,
including yourself.
99% of people are doing the best with what they can. Like, my parents, are you mad at your parents? No, they did the best with what they can. Right. And that's why I have a foundation, is to help parents, and forgiveness comes 100% part of that, path to stay sober. I got to forgive. I keep on hanging on to the anger of, you didn't do this or you didn't do this. I wouldn't be sober today.
Like the old saying goes too, like, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know it, how are you supposed to know it? Right.
And that's okay if you don't know it. And for me is, if somebody asks, do you know something? It's hard for me to say no, because that for me almost reveals that I'm dumb, because I felt that my whole life. So it's hard for me, even to what you just said. So that's why I'm open with, my story. As you asked when we started this, is there anything not off limits? I'm like, no, because I know I'm not the only one in the world. I've got a platform where I appreciate these conversations. It might resonate with somebody who, one of your followers, one of your listeners, no matter if that's sobriety or PTSD or suicide or drugs or alcohol or whatever disorders.
Okay, so what would your advice be to somebody who kind of doesn't really know but recognizes a few things that you're saying in this podcast, and they go, shit, what do I do now?
Well, everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. Right? You're good at certain things and you're not. Right? You both have strengths and weaknesses. And that's the biggest thing, is you're okay. It's finding out what your strengths are. In school, you suck at this, or you suck at this, you suck at this, right? Whatever that is, right? So it's getting tested, but it's okay. Everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, and find what they are. Hockey was mine, and that's all I was good at. I've got dyslexia, as we talked about, which is reading. I get dysgraphia, which is the writing. I get dyscalculia, which is the math, and ADHD. So I got a 4-banger. So
you get a discount anywhere for that?
So for education, I had to find something else, and hockey was my life. That's where I got my self-esteem from, was on the ice.
Mm-hmm. Was it a hard post-retirement to find that identity again? Because I think that's something that I've kind of struggled with as well, is you've been playing hockey for so long, now you're done. It's like, well, who am I? There's no morning skate at 10. There's no road trips. Like, who am I? What am I?
Yeah, you know what? That's the biggest problem I have right now, and I'll throw this back to you, is I don't care about the CT. And, I'll preface that. I do. But I think we don't get any help leaving the game. No matter what, if you leave when you're 25 or you're 30 or 35, you did something for 20 years, 25 years, 28 years, 30 years, right? And now we have to enter the real world. And we have zero support in the hockey community from the NHL to NHLPA to AHL, all the way down for that transition. Like, for me, I entered the real world at 40. That's what a college kid does at 20. Try doing that at 40 when you have, I got divorced, I had child support, right? I had bills to pay. Big difference. So to your question is, I was lost. That's where my drugs and alcohol became my best friends, because I didn't know where to go. Learning disorders. I'm all, oh, you want to stand up? Great. I've had a paid job for 3 months since I retired. Not one person would hire me.
Based on what criteria?
I've never done a resume. I've never had work experience.
That'd be difficult without a resume. And with the writing, okay, now, yeah.
So nobody hired me. During the game, during I'm playing, oh, bro, yeah, give me tickets or whatever. When you're done, I'll help you. Crickets. I've been homeless. Got divorced. Yeah, where was everybody then? Right. So it's, to your point, leaving the game, no matter if you're a hockey player or if you're a cop, if you've done something your whole life and now you have to transition out into something else, it's not easy.
Wow, what a great answer to that question. And if you're really excited about hearing from all of the other people that we have on this interview summer series, you can sign up to be a Patreon member, channel member right now. Both of those will get you access right now to all of them, and you can binge them if you're at home sick or you're just not enjoying the weather, whatever it may be. You can get those right now for a very minimal cost.
$5.
So easy, simple.
$5. Every single interview, you get perks, merch, channel member exclusives, all that and more in every single episode from the summer series, including Chris Mason, Matt Murray, Jamie McLennan, Dale Weiss, Jordan Schmaltz, Jay Swish, Matt Hackett, Rich Cooper, best-selling author, professional athlete, divorce lawyer, Ido Walney, Brent Sopel, Bill Ranford, Navy SEAL TC Cummings, Toronto Maple Leafs goalie coach Dusty Emu, my former teammates Justin Schmidt and Trevor Babin, and more. $5 get you all of them right now. Back to the episode.
Right.
Do you mind walking us through that process? You mentioned being homeless, the divorce and everything. So you finish your playing career. I mean, we'll come back to it in a bit, but you finish your playing career, and then what happens, and how does that lead up to today?
I went to Russia after on the Stanley Cup. Played there for 3 years, which was amazing. My last year I played here in the AHL for the Chicago Wolves. I wanted to get my 1000th game in North America, and obviously it wasn't the Blackhawks, but it was in Chicago where I was, where I lived, where my kids were. Then after that, it was, got divorced right towards the end of my career. Then it was just, all right, now what do I do? Right? You have bills. You're trying to figure out what you do. Child support, split everything. And those bills add up pretty quickly when you're not bringing anything in.
Did that affect your playing career? Like, if you're having the divorce during the playing career, like how did that affect your playing days?
I think that was my second last year. I went through it. So my career was almost over. But yeah, that's, you work your whole life, you play your whole life, and then, half, 3/4, 7/8 is all gone because you got kids, and, it's not a 50-50 when you got kids and stuff involved. Right. So, it's tough. And then entering that new chapter of my life alone, it was a lonely place. I didn't have support. And frankly, I couldn't even, how I supported myself was the drugs and alcohol. And that's what led into getting sober. It was when you got nobody who believes when you don't believe in yourself, nobody else can believe in you.
Out of curiosity, I'm trying to be in your shoes here for a second. So in a situation where you're in North America and, you're having learning issues on the ice, X's and O's and that kind of stuff, getting over to the K, where every other North American would basically have the same problems that you had, and now you're all kind of sharing that because it's a new language and you can't read a menu and you can't understand this wait staff. Was it kind of easier?
you know, the first city I played in Novokuznets, which was the middle of Siberia, 5-hour east flight from Moscow. You know, it took me, I was there with 2 Finnish guys at the time. We're trying to order McDonald's, and it probably took us 15 minutes to order McDonald's. Yeah, French fries. And it ended up being Katushki free. It's French fries. I'm like, how am I supposed to know that? We're trying to point at the menu. We were almost hopped over the counter to point at the menu. And, you know, so, you know, Russia was great to me. And why it was great to me, you know, I got treated with great respect. I had no problem, but it was more to it than the game. It kept me playing a game I loved. And it kept me playing. It wasn't game. It was my livelihood. It was the only thing I was good in my life. It was my self-esteem. So it was more than a job. It was more than a sport. It's my livelihood and life perspective of self-esteem. And so, you know, to your point, yeah, there was only a couple of us that spoke English. So it felt like a normal day almost, you know, not understand what was going on. And I was always excited to go to, you know, St. Petersburg or Moscow or outside of the country. I'd sit by the lobby and hear, you know, the front office people speaking English. Music to my ear. We weren't talking Canadian though. There was no bunny hug or a toque or some Smarties or but it was close enough to hear a little English.
What made you go over to Russia? You've played all this time in North America, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go over to the KHL?
Because I looked at it, go back to 2004, 2005, that lockout. I missed that whole year. You know, so I had opportunities to go over Russia. You know, obviously that was early in my career, and I didn't think we'd be out that long. So I missed a whole year of my career. Coming towards the end of my career, obviously we're talking about the next lockout. I had a 1-year deal on the table from Nashville, and I had a 2-year deal from Russia. I took the 2-year deal because self-esteem was going to be longer if I took a 2-year deal than a 1-year deal. So it was, I didn't have to chase that Stanley Cup. I got it. Now I was chasing a way to stay in the game, play as long as I could for that self-esteem, not for the money. How can I play? The only thing I'm good in life. That's what I felt like. Only thing I was good in life was hockey. So how did I end up over there? Was, you know, I had an extra year contract that they offered me.
Do you enjoy it though?
I did. You know, again, I was in and out of 10, 12 different countries, and Kazakhstan and Belarus and Finland and Czech Republic and Slovakia and Kazakhstan. You know, places that you don't end up, right? You know, and most people never get to. And again, I was treated with great respect, and I was actually over there in 2014 when they invaded. You know, so I've got world stories, but they were great to me. You know, got to see all these countries and try some foods, which I was disappointed. Ketchup, when they didn't have the ketchup, I didn't need it.
Well, I'll tell you what, dude, ketchup's the greatest condiment on earth. Nobody does it better than Heinz.
Well, you should see the, you know, the old squirt bottle they have at restaurants?
Yeah.
I just got one yesterday sitting on my counter. It goes on everything: French toast, chicken noodle soup, ketchup sandwich.
You know what? So you remind me of my dad. My dad does listen to the show, but he, this is probably like 5-10 years ago. He went to a yard sale and he came back with like 10 different blenders. And I said, why did you get 10 blenders, Dad? He said, well, I don't have to do the dishes anytime soon. I can make my 10 smoothies and then do the dishes. And I said, you're still doing the same amount of dishes. It's just you're delaying the process, right? This reminds me of you with your ketchup squirty.
Well, it was actually one of my dyslexic kids. Their family bought me a Christmas gift, and it took about 8 weeks to get it in. So I hadn't seen them, since before Christmas. So we had the charity event yesterday. They were there, so that's why I ended up. They bought it for me. The wife shakes her head. You know, I make her carry extra ketchup packets in her pocket. So we go to a restaurant without ketchup. We've got ketchup always.
Come prepared. That makes total sense.
Why not? You know, somebody's got to take. You got to take care. You can't take. You know, somebody else take care. You got to take care of yourself somehow.
Didn't your dad do that? He'd bring like cases of Coca-Cola because he refused to drink Pepsi, right?
Yeah, we've been into a few restaurants where if they didn't serve Coca-Cola, you'd be like, all right, pack up. Here we go.
See, I'm the opposite. I'll take the 8-ball, but I'll drink Pepsi and I'll snort Coke.
You brought it up, so I'm going to touch on it. while you were playing, obviously it's no secret that stuff is readily available. The question I kind of have is it managed well for the most part for players?
So, obviously, alcohol was, that's what hockey is community. So I didn't get into that till after my career, really hard. Obviously today, everything's readable for us whenever we want it, but that wasn't, obviously nowadays things are a little bit different now with what's out there, what's in there with fentanyl and all, kind of that stuff. It's a different animal, but, I didn't venture down those paths, till after my career, but anything's out there when you want it. It's just one phone call away from the right person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the legendary stories of Theo Fleury and whatnot. I mean, I wonder sometimes that some guys get a little extra leash, when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Well, obviously Fleury, Theo is open about his past traumas, right? And that's kind of where, for me, with being sobriety, I drug abuse and alcohol abuse is, childhood trauma to me. So why, right? If you can go and have one or two, it's 100 or 200 for me, right? Because I love that feeling. That feeling is for me was getting away from feeling myself.
Have you found a community since you've retired of realizing like, hey, I wasn't alone in all this, and have you been able to find that outside of the game and in retirement?
Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm open with it when we talk about this. Is when I talk about it, when I help, that's why I started the foundation. I never want a person to feel the way I do. I pretty much had everything happen to me, so I take calls all day, talk to people all day. That's my therapy, right? Those are my AA meetings all day long. My wife's been sober 17 years. We don't drink. So yeah, her and I live the kind of the sober life right now. And normally she's already in bed. She's like, all right, come crawling. We're old now. I got grandkids. I'm staring 50 down the barrel. But I always say this: you attract what you give off. Now, remember in high school, I only date bad boys because that's what you give off. So when you start living a lifestyle and you attract the right people, you attract the people that you want to attract is what would you give off.
Crazy you mentioned that. Dave and I have had lots of talks about that, but just on the topic of like even females, like if you want a specific type of gal, let's say like you want like a traditional gal, okay, well, reverse engineer, what does a traditional gal want? That's what you got to become, and then you attract that. It's interesting you mentioned that because it's a universal truth outside of dating and in business and all these things as well. The foundation, what's very different from any of the dyslexia foundations out there is I care about self-esteem. That is the number one first, and if I can get you to love yourself, your life is going to be amazing. Look in the mirror and say, I love you, know it, feel it, and believe it. Because all dyslexics hate themselves. Why am I that kid? Why can't I just do this? I'm in grade 6. Why can't I read this? I just want the cute dog to like me and hold my hand, right? I can't do this. So, back to what you're talking about, more you love yourself and you're okay with who you are, that's when your life changes. Well, is that not the hardest respect to earn, is the respect of yourself? And then you can work on the outside world from there.
At the end of the day, there's nobody else that spends more time with yourself than yourself.
We're going to put a lot of links down in the podcast description, obviously, and I know we got lots more questions for you, but I think this is a good opportunity. Talk about the foundation, talk about how people can get involved if they want to reach out, and to really take this opportunity to break it all down.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The Sopel Foundation, obviously, SopelFoundation.org is a website. Go back to what is dyslexia, so dyslexia is 1 in 5 and hereditary. Second most common thing in the world next to cancer. Everybody obviously knows autism. That's 1 in 45 and not hereditary. So just take a look at the amount of people. 50% of people in the prison in the world are dyslexic.
Wow. 50?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
89% of suicide notes left are dyslexic.
Wow.
75% of us are addicted to drugs and alcohol. So, and then the other flip side, 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. 50% of people that work at NASA are dyslexic. So it can be a gift if you understand it. 1, you get diagnosed. 2, understanding what that means. and 3, finding your journey, right? I didn't find out till I was 32. And how I found out is I got my daughter tested. Got her tested, did the results, came back, and went through all the tests, and like, oh, that's me. So if my daughter didn't have it, if it can skip a generation, it's about 5% of people it skips a generation. I would still think here today that I'm just stupid.
Without naming names, can you go back into your Rolodex and recognize it in other guys that you played with?
I can walk by somebody now and tell you they're struggling. Because we talk about energy, and I've struggled my whole life. Self-esteem, suicide is something that daily. It's not if, it's when I'm going to commit suicide. That's what I look at every day. I've sat in front of the train for hours and days. When am I going to jump? Right. So I live on that side. I've been on that side, and I know when somebody's on that side. And that's why there's certain things like the, text 988 or whatever, the suicide hotline is the biggest scam, because that's not what we do. In the hockey world, in the school world, I get called in for people on suicide, and I didn't see there's any signs. I can show you 50 signs. You just didn't know what to look for. And that's why I'm very open about, the foundation. So we help all that, dyslexics. Self-esteem is the number one thing. I need you to love yourself. I don't care about reading or writing. No matter if you're a fireman or a hockey player or a baseball player or a golfer or, a CEO, if you're that dark, guess what? It doesn't matter what we're not learning. I need you to be okay with whatever that, radios, you're that dark, you're not learning. You may be doing your job, but you're not enjoying it, and you're not getting better because you're not learning. And once I can get you out of that and understand what this means is, in the foundation, it's like 99.9% of the foundation for dyslexia in the world are ran by non-dyslexics. I'm one of the very few foundations in the world ran by a dyslexic for a dyslexic.
It kind of reminds me of that time that Elon Musk went up on stage on Saturday Night Live when he did his opening monologue and said that he is the first autistic person as Asperger's to host Saturday Night Live. And when he said it, I kind of went, I didn't know that. But in my brain, he went, yeah, he showed all the signs. Like, it made total sense when it came out of his mouth. I went, yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And he's got Asperger's, and what Asperger's is a form of autism, which is the social part. So now everybody's, not political, everybody's like, oh, he's weird. He's got Asperger's. There's a reason why. Mm-hmm. Just like everybody, you talk to anybody about me, my rituals were the most ridiculous things in the world, right? I had to get up, and I never napped. I had to turn left at this time. I had this song and dance around and spin in my head. The rookies used to make fun of me in the NHL. You had to do an act, and they're acting me out but that was the glue that was keeping my life together without not even knowing.
And people would call that a superstition.
People are calling a hell of a lot more than a superstition. What I was doing, and dance around and shake my head, and it was the only way I knew how to live. And I was so fearful of the real world, petrified. Nightmares of the real world, that I would not fear from what you call superstition, ritual, because that's how scared I was of the real world.
Going back, let's just say you got diagnosed when you were your daughter's age, when she was diagnosed. Do you think you would, not if, how would you have handled things differently?
Probably, well, we'll put this, 2 ways. Is probably no different, because dyslexia, only about, I believe in my mind, only about 20% of the world knows what dyslexia is. So dyslexia is probably one of the most corrupt businesses in the world. So now we'll make it. I made it to the NHL because of my dyslexia, because I had to work harder, right? I stayed on that ice longer than the other kids, frozen toes, minus 30 in Saskatchewan, because I didn't want to get out to do the homework. So it kept me out there longer. So the grit's got me there. And to answer your question, I don't play those games because I had to go through every single one of these injuries and these PTSDs and these traumas to get here today to have this conversation, that one of your listeners is going to resonate with it. And that's been my purpose. That is my purpose.
That's the ultimate goal too, man. If one person listening, you can help them. That's a win for everybody.
You can't get, when you're playing hockey, you don't go from 0 to 2-0. Can't get to 2 till you get to 1.
Well, depends on what team you ask, I guess, right?
Well, if you're U.S. Canada,
Well, and I'm going to try and read your mind here, but I know there's a picture right behind you of you holding up the mug, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But I'm assuming that you would take a win and making sure a kid knows where he's at over a Stanley Cup ring any day of the week?
Oh, I've lost my Stanley Cup ring all the time. I threw it around. I lost it many times. It was actually broken. My new wife was, Angel, who literally saved my life. She went and got it fixed and got it resized because I'm fat now. I was always fat, but now I'm really fat. So to your point, I would give the Stanley Cup away. I'd give the ring away to make sure never, dyslexia is saw in a different light. So no kid never has to go through what I have. 100%.
Do you still have the rings or the ring?
I do. Like I said, when I had to find it, when I finally moved in, we moved in together and I brought it. And things smashed up and because I threw it in my bag and my backpack. It didn't mean anything to me because of the scars that came along with it in my road to get me here. But yeah, we got it fixed. It went from a size 12, I think, to a 15. So now I'm really fat. I got big hands, but so I do have it. It's somewhere. It's in the safe now, but it's not important to me. What's important to me is every kid that I know is struggling today.
Forgive my ignorance. The ring's just one size, though. Like, you can take the Stanley Cup ring that they've molded for you and fix it and then make it a different size?
Well, so you go to everybody gets size for theirs. I think you can go to a jeweler and they do whatever. It took like a month for them to diamonds were all the way around, so they had to cut it, take the diamonds out, make it bigger. I guess some rings you can only make so big because there's only so much material. But I didn't know you could do that either, and I didn't know I was that fat. So he's like, "Let me show your fingers."
Tell a jeweler, keep all the extra shaving, sell it on eBay.
You talked about the experiences you had going from different countries playing in the K. I'm curious to know, because you'd be considered a journeyman in the National Hockey League. And after Chicago and going to these different teams, was it exciting at least? Knowing what your state of mind was, or was it more of a burden?
Well, my nickname is Samsonite. I got more baggage than Samsonite does. So it was my job, right? I knew I didn't connect. It was hard going to no matter when you're walking in a new room, no matter who you are, no matter what you are, it's a different place. It's a different routine. It's a different coaching staff. It's okay, what am I going to be asked to? It's a different role. So I was happy to continue my career. I always had to look at, not that they didn't want me. Okay, they wanted me. It's not that the team didn't want me. Another team wanted me. So I think I won the cup once. I think I ended up losing to the eventual Stanley Cup winner like 4 or 5 other times in my career. So it was always hard moving, but it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're half crazy like myself, or you're a star in the league, or you're talking about coming down the trade deadline here, and in the NHL, I think we're 2 weeks away. Those last 2 weeks, these next 2 weeks are the most stressful time. You've got family, you got to move, you got to go where you got to go, are you going to fit in, are you going to be used the way you want it? A million unknowns.
You mentioned a little bit of excess weight. I got to ask about Big Buff. What was it like playing with that guy? Because I've heard some real interesting stories just about him and then also his weight.
And I'm curious about it too, because as a Winnipeg Jet resident and we used to work for the team and used to collect a paycheck with that logo up in the top left corner, still kind of feel like we got left high and dry with that guy.
No, you know what? Buff was an amazing human, right? He loved the game. That's it. He played the game because he loved it. And when he didn't love it is when he left. Buff was, there was no other person out there like Buff. I think of the year he was playing at like 270, moving like he's 170, sniping like he's 300. Like there was no other. Such an awesome guy, such an amazing human. And obviously you guys in Winnipeg got a good taste of Buff, and got to respect him for playing the game for when he loved, and when he was done, he was done. And now, when's the last time you heard from Buff? Well, Buff's in Buff's little world, and
to be fair,
Buff's out in Minnesota fishing. Apparently, he's a pro fisherman now.
Oh, yeah, that's been Buff his whole life. He lived up in Roseau by himself, right? And I shouldn't say what I mean by himself. Small town. He got drafted by Chicago Blackhawks. He unplugged his phone because he'd rather fish than go to camp. That's Buff, right? That's every kid got drafted, no matter who you are. Oh my God, I got drafted. I got a count. No, he unplugged his phone, so they couldn't get a hold of him for weeks.
Got 3 lines in the water. And God bless his wife, though, because she's been trying her best to tell him, hey, you know, this guy with the podcast, these guys in Winnipeg, you should go on. He's fishing.
Yeah. Nope, you'll never get him. And his wife's an awesome lady. You know, obviously I got traded with Buff from Chicago to Atlanta too. So
yeah, which means you're kind of part of the Winnipeg Jet history now, man. That's pretty cool.
I was the last team before we end up in Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
Well, I got wife's an awesome lady. Great family. And Buff's always lived in Buff's world and did it Buff's way, and gotta love him for that. But special human, and love that guy. And he was a key component. No, I didn't want to go. I practiced. I didn't want to go in the corner with him.
Was there ever a story that comes to mind? Because as a fan, it's like seared in my mind, that video of him grabbing 2 guys out of the Vegas pile and dragging them around like they're kids. I'm sure you would have had an experience where, like, man, this guy is just powerful. Like, you can't move this man.
Well, obviously we were playing Philadelphia, in the final, and you're playing Pronger, right? Pronger's another man, and just vicious, just beat you up, stick he goes in the corner with him and just laid him out, and I don't know if I've ever seen Chris Pronger ever been laid out before. And there's Buffs. Yeah, there's what was that hit against Mark? Was it Mark Stone?
Yeah. Stoner. Yeah.
I don't even know how Stoner ever got back up.
Yeah.
I don't even know how he's still playing from that. But yeah, Buff played 250 to 280 was his weight.
Well, there was rumors when you come into camp, they're saying you have to cut weight, and he kind of went, well, I play better this way. And they said, okay, fine.
And that's what his Buff was. Buff. Like, you cannot compare him having the hands, having the shot. You could cut him down, and he was. And I was truly, you try and slim him down to 230 or whatever it is. That wasn't Buff. His body, there's no other Buff in the world, and yeah, they let him go. They tried to bring him in for the first 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it was, and when he first came to training camp, and his wife trying to get him dietitians and stuff. And when you let him go, that's when he was his best.
I heard a story from a pretty reliable source, like you
You
mentioned.
need reliable sources, eh?
Well, we already gave up one of them already early in the show, but
yeah.
I heard that, like you mentioned, they were trying to tighten the ratchet on him for the first couple of years, and the breaking point was, in year-end meetings, one of the management says, "Listen, we're going to get you on a diet. We need you to be underweight. We need you like 250 or less. We're going to have everybody working with you." And he just kind of turned his phone off and then came into camp. He came in at 275, which is really like 325. They fired the entire nutritional and strength and conditioning coaching staff.
Well, that's after our lockout, and was it 0405 when Big Walt Kutcher showed up at 310. And again, they tried to rein him in for years. Again, I think it speaks volumes for himself when he got drafted. Being 17 years old, 18 years old, and you unplug your phone, you'd rather go fishing, and that was Buff, right? And I at some point in time, I don't know when that was. They just, all right, they just let him go. And the more that, just like anybody else, the more somebody can relax and feel comfortable with the placement, the better you play. And that kind of goes back to the more tired I was. That's when I could play. I didn't have to worry. I didn't worry about all those other things and what that coach is thinking and that what coach is thinking. And it's so evident to me, and so many guys in the NHL, Vancouver and Pedersen, they've killed him. They're not getting him back this year. He's got no self-esteem left in him. And you still want to go and you want to hear about it. I played in Vancouver, Canadian city, if they went the other way and welcome him back, obviously Miller's gone right now. The more harder you're on him, the deeper you're burying him.
What do you see in that situation? Do you see Elias being dyslexic and JT just not understanding, or what's your vantage point?
Well, no, I wouldn't say dyslexic. I saw one comment. They said he's soft. I don't know anybody who wants to be come and screamed and yelled at every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. Now, let's just replay this if you're a boss, right? If you walked in, you called one of your employees in and, that's just bullshit. What do you do? Or, hey, listen, I know you're working hard. but can we try something? We need a little bit, how about this? Let's try it this way next. If you take those approaches, but once you get, because that was me in self-esteem. Once I hit a certain point, I was as far down as, so I wouldn't say dyslexic, but the world's a different time now.
Yeah, well, I think that's one thing that has changed in the game, where it was one size fits all. Coach comes in, kicks a couple of water bottles around, throws some sticks, you know what I mean? And then it's supposed to get the boys fired up, and he walks out there going, I got him good. But now it's more on a peer-to-peer individual relationship where I got to talk to this guy a little bit differently than I talk to this guy and the way I talk to the whole room.
Well, and that's when you get the most out of your players, is knowing your guys. Right? You walk in a dressing room, there's 23 different personalities, different humans, different stories, different paths, different guys, different religions, different races. So the better you know each one. I was a guy that if you got me fired, like Mark Crawford and I had some matches on the bench, right? He got me my wires crossed so mad that I played hockey and I didn't think hockey. It worked for me. Other guys, you had to go talk to them. And, you had some coaches that go to the media, right? And call them out in the media. Well, that might work for some guys. Maybe some guys it doesn't. So the better you know your players and how to handle your players is when you're going to get players to go through the wall for you as a coach.
Do you have a coach that comes to mind where you think that they knew you the best, they got the most out of you, and maybe one that just didn't quite understand and maybe didn't get the most value out of you?
To answer that properly, I didn't know what that meant for myself. If that makes sense. Again, I didn't know why I didn't nap till 2 years ago. So, obviously Mark Crawford and I had him the most, most games in the NHL, obviously in Vancouver and then in LA too. We had some great battles on the bench. He was the coach. I needed that right on the bench. I needed a guy, to come after, it was hard at me, but after that, I needed somebody who didn't, but I didn't know myself. So, to be fair to any coaches, you got to understand yourself to be fully committed. And actually, committed is not the right word, to be able to understand what you needed. And I think the players now probably have a better idea of what they need more than what we did back in the day. And we're head down, buried down, go for beers, have smokes, go to the game, play the game. Now they're doing yoga and playing video games and sharing their carrot sticks. Obviously drastically different than, the way the three of us got, growing up the game of hockey.
Well, I want to kind of shift this a little bit. You talked a little bit about coaching and the way it's shifted the way they deal with players. Does the media play a role in the psyche of a player? And because I haven't seen a whole lot of change in the way the media deals with players individually or as a team.
I think that falls on the team. Brian Burke, was my GM. Obviously, he was awesome. When I was first playing early in my career, coming down the trade deadline, my name's rumored. He'd call me. Hey, Soaps, your name's out there. I'm not going to trade you. I'm not, if something big comes across there where I can't turn it up, I will. Right. But, I'm not training. So that communication is important. The media's got to do a job. Right. I think it's the coaches and the inside that locker room and management need to handle themselves way they need to, so that that person understands that, right? So that guy understands that he has support in the back room. Obviously that Vancouver situation, there was none of that. The GM was calling out both those guys. And now one's gone. As soon as that happens, you can tell this. So the media's got a job to do, and that job's not going to change. I think, let's put it this way: there needs to be more understanding in the whole world than just in the sports world.
What's your take on the media and how they treat players? Because I had a little bit of an awakening moment. A really good friend of mine, Matt Murray, he absolutely changed my life. I love the dude, and I had the privilege of he texted me earlier last year. He said, "Dude, I'd love to do a podcast. Let's get it done." I said, "Okay, cool." Come down, and I knew to some degree there'd be a lot of people in the media that would pick up on this because you're interviewing the goalie for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then fast forward a month or two, episode goes up, and I have Google Alerts turned on for our show, so that when different media outlets and whatnot they repost, I get an email, And then I started getting these emails with all these links and some of the spin jobs the media did of how Matt Murray manipulates the salary cap, this, that, and I'm reading some of these, and I can't actually believe how far they'd stretched this. So, like, what's your take on how the media treat players and just some of the spin jobs that they do? I know it's a little bit of a...
No, 100%. That's the hard part. You can take two words, right, of a sentence, then they tack on their 10 sentences on the back, or that's the spin job. And then obviously social media, on the 24-hour bus rides from Seattle to Swift Current, there was no cell phones, or my Discman only, the 4 double D batteries only last about 2 hours, and played a little Kaiser in the back and slept. We didn't have to worry about that. Unfortunately, you can't control them, but the tighter niche room that you have and the communication with the coaches and management know where they stand. I think is a bigger key now than it ever was, because of all that outside influence and the stories and the manipulating of the cap and this injury and that injury. Being for myself in Vancouver, my last year was year Anaheim beat us in the second round. I hurt my back, right before game one, the day before game one, right to the media, told the media what I did. Yeah. Dropped a cracker, threw my back out. Yeah. True story. Oh, and you went and told the media, right? Now everybody's wearing. Now the biggest joke, go on eBay, you'll find the cracker. I've had 3 herniated discs in my back, since I was in grade 8. So the wrong move, right? I go grab my cell phone, and that's what I did. But he threw me down the river right before the playoffs, right? Game 1. Can't stand the guy. That tells me where I stood with him and the organization. Now let's go back to if somebody's got your back as an organization, team, and coaches, internally, that's all. You need to know that, and those things don't happen.
You think that the media would be able to get more out of the players if, like, just to use a couple examples, like that scumbag Mark Spector in Edmonton, where he's calling Leon, he's like, "Why are you so pissy with me all the time?" Or that dirtbag Steve Simmons, who's trying to pull up Austin Matthews, like, medical reports and put him in the Toronto Star. If you didn't do that and you're more honest, because they're so dishonest, these members of the media, you would get more from the players, and they kind of like let that guard down, and everybody would win a lot more, right?
100%. Just like you said, hold the door for a lady in the morning and say good morning. Good morning. Hope you have a great day. You may say that little lady's life. You don't know what she's going through. Couldn't agree more. The more that you want to go and manipulate and try and screw guys, the more you're screwing all the teams, and there are 31 other teams, and 800 other guys. I couldn't agree more. The more respectful you are to them, the more you're going to get back from them, and the more you're going to get of them. Couldn't agree more.
What was it that got you out of after you were diagnosed and whatnot, what was it that really kind of set you going, I got my path now?
Intervention, almost died. Right. So, I messed up a buddy's big wedding, and my parents were there, and they'd never seen me, completely out of my mind. I had a bottle of vodka at dinner Friday night with them, and then I went out, and, the wedding, you name it, in my little drug box. And so they saw something they never had. 2 days later, I walk in a room and had an intervention. I was in rehab. So if they didn't do that, I definitely would have been dead. So if there was no light, it was that intervention that saved my life. Obviously had some things happen, in rehab, and realized this is where I'm supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to live. Knock on wood, I have a relapse. I've stayed sober to this point in time. But if it wasn't for that intervention, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And thank God you're here too, man.
Yeah, believe me when I tell you, and take this wholeheartedly, the world's a better place for having you around, man, especially with a lot of the hard work that you're doing right now. So if anyone appreciates it, it's me, and I know there's a lot of other people that would echo that sentiment.
Well, I appreciate that, and taking the time, and love what you guys do. It makes me laugh. It's life's too short. We're not guaranteed tomorrow, so let's enjoy it, and then let's be respectful. And none of us are going. It's not easy for anybody, but we're all here together. So I appreciate it, and then let me jabber on here and talk about my foundation and kids and struggling. It means a lot to me.
No, listen, and it's funny through all the stories. I mean, you still got a smile on your face. So I mean, I'm sure there's parts of it that really hit deep when you say it out loud and you hear it to yourself, but you still kind of take it somewhat lightly because you're smiling. It was a life experience, right?
I have my good days and bad, and thank God my wife. I slept. It was a couple weeks ago. I slept for 5 days. I didn't slept.
That sounds awesome.
My depression. I wear my heart in my sleeves, and I don't care who you are. If you're struggling, I'll help. I'll try and help any way I can. So it hit me hard, and like I said, thank God for her who check on me and let me be. That was my safe place to sleep. But so I don't have all good days. Most days are hard, but I'm trying to do them with a smile. All these fake teeth and all.
Let me bring up a couple of questions that we make pretty standard here on the show. I'm curious to know what was the first big purchase you made when you got that first big dollar check?
I think it might have been a 36 pack of Molson Canadian.
How many packs did you get?
A little taste of home.
I supplied the beer for a long time. No, I didn't have any. I didn't have any big purchases. I know I gave my family, my mom some money, my dad some money. I really never made some big purchases. I got supplied all the beer for many parties. That I know for sure. That's where most of it went.
Well, that's one. Let me ask you about that then, because it's kind of a trend that we've been having with a lot of our guests in this series. But do you feel like you were supported well enough in a lot of big financial decisions? Because as I've said before, I'll say it again. You're probably tired of me hearing me saying it, but handing a kid $850,000 at 18 years old is societally, it's just a bad idea. So do you feel like you had enough support financially when you were first getting into that money?
No, again, go back to a guy, I got dysgraphia, which is a writing portion, dyscalculia, which is a math portion. So I can't gamble because I can't do 2 plus 2. I don't know, minus 120. I don't. So no, I had all these learning disorders. I blew through. Obviously, I blew through money. Bought a lot of different stupid things. As I played. Definitely not. I agree with you on that aspect. Handing kids $800,000, $1 million, or basketball $10 million, recipe for disaster. But I didn't have enough know all of my own self. So
do you think it would have been helpful though to say, hey, listen, there's somebody here. Go talk to this person. They're trustworthy. Do you think that would have been helpful at least?
Some guys absolutely. And I think that option definitely needs to be there. Again, myself with my path and all my learning disorders and hating education and I wouldn't say hating people, but people that try to tell me what to do. I got told I was done my whole life. So 100% would have been better than not. 1,000,000%. Would I maybe listened? Well, if I listened that much, it's better than no much. So and I completely agree. It's had some good parties though.
Actually, I actually had one of those parties with one of your old teammates, Cam Barker.
Case of coke in here too, and good man. I haven't seen him for a long time.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen him in a while either. I'd like to hear from him as well. Anything else, Trev?
I still got like 300 more questions. Well, why don't we talk about? I know we talked about you playing for the Atlanta Thrashers after you got traded, but you did still play for the first ever game in Winnipeg with the Jets, right?
No, I never.
The Montreal Canadiens, the first ever game. No.
No, was it? Did we play Winnipeg? Who did we play?
So I remember the first ever game was Montreal in Winnipeg.
No, wasn't me.
No,
I went from Atlanta the trade deadline, the last trade deadline before they went to Winnipeg.
Right, but he's saying like were you in a Habs jersey playing in Winnipeg?
Nope. So I finished that season. That year was the year we lost to Boston in Game 7 in overtime. Then the team moved to Winnipeg, and then I went to Russia.
Okay.
What was it like playing with Carey Price?
Unbelievable. Obviously playing the puck, just calm. And for me, it's, I couldn't skate. I was the fat and the slowest guy. I just tried to block everything. So, I got the pleasure of playing with some amazing goalies, and he's top of the list. And I feel bad the wear and tear that he was put onto. a bad strategy to count on the goalie to make 35 to 40 saves a night. Great human, great goalie. Just didn't need to move. Exactly. You could read the play. You knew exactly what was going on before it happened.
We've talked about him quite a bit on the show, but there was a quote from an interview maybe about a year ago or change roughly, where they were talking about all of his success, the Hart, the Vezina, the Olympics, the you name it, et cetera, all the accomplishments. And would you trade that for your health? Because you mentioned how he can barely even pick up his daughter and take her down the stairs. His goal, his dream is to just make his daughter and his wife and his family some pancakes on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, and he can't do that. That's tough. Like, that's a guy where he was the backbone of the team. I saw a stat the other day that he only had one 80-point score ever, and it was his rookie season with Alexei Kovalev, and they just rode him. And then obviously when he blew, or maybe not blew his knee, but he had the knee injuries, we need this guy back. We don't care at what cost.
Well, I played probably 200 games with a broken bone. I probably played 50 games with my back out of place. That's our mentality, right? But I'm bone on bone on both my knees and both my hips. I got 300 discs. I got as far as I can turn my wrist. I go to the ATM. I got to stop the car, put it in park. So when I started dating my wife, she's like, well, what are you doing? I'm coming across to take the money out of the bank machine like this. People never think about it that way. It's a business. And we put our life on the line, and, just to feel normal, if I drop something, good chance I'm not getting down and pick it up. The wife will come get it, or the grandkids, which I have two of them, and he turns 5 tomorrow. They come and pick it up. So everyone ever sees about us and what we go through after. It's I feel for Carey. Love the guy, and hopefully you ever need something, I'm always available, because the sober life, we all got to stick together.
Let me ask you about Taser, playing with Jonathan Toews. Mark Crawford said once upon a time he's never coached he said, if I had to pick a winner out of all the guys I've coached, that would be Taser.
Yeah, captain of Canada, right? Coming in, did everything right. Played a 200-foot game. I think that was what he, obviously he could put up points, but he played that 200-foot game, and that's, Kaner's still playing because he didn't have to play a 200-foot game, right? He played the hard minutes. He was responsible. It's all those little details, and I think that's what the game misses nowadays. It's those details of the game, and he did every single one of them. From the time he came in to the time he left, and it sounds like he may try and do a comeback next year. I don't. Just go out. You've done everything you need to do. Just go enjoy life. Don't do it to your body again.
Always remember that Canadian Tire commercial with the dude. He's like, "Hey, we're Chicago Blackhawks captain Jonathan Toews. What's the C stand for? Crazy good."
And he was, right? Yeah. And what was that shootout in World Juniors against Carey Price?
Yeah, they kept putting him in.
And was it Oshie too?
Yeah.
No, Jeff Frazee was the American goalie. Iconic goalie with the eye-check setup. Sorry, a little bit of goalieisms, but I remember what did he bury? 3 or 4 in a row on Jeff Frazee?
Kept putting him in.
Wasn't Carey Price the Canadian goalie?
Price was the Canadian goalie in net, but it was on the American Jeff Frazee. I remember that at the time. Did you ever have a moment, Sobes, where Carey Price is good, obviously, when you go there, but when you're playing with them, you're practicing day in, day out, when you're just like, this one moment, dude, this guy's nasty. We got one of the best goalies in the world right here. What a treat this is to watch him.
Dude, if I look back, at some of the goalies that I played with, and, my 2 goalies when I was in Russia, Vasilevskiy and Sorokin.
Whoa. No way.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Vasilevskiy was my starting goalie in UFA at 18. Basically, and then you got Sorokin. He was getting called up from the MJ or the VHL and playing games and lead, at 16.
Wow. What were they like?
Again, Vasilevsky's been the same size, just ridiculous. I've never seen a Russian anybody work as hard as he was. They're 2 hours early, didn't drink, married his wife, stretching these retarded stretches, legs like this. A great human. Sorokin, great.
Would it be fair to compare Vasilevskiy, just based on what you're saying, to almost Khabib? God, my wife, training. That's it.
Yeah, and that was it. His goal was to make it. He married his wife during the Sochi Olympics, so because he knew he was going to come to North America, and that was the only way she could come. With the visa situations, and look where he is. So back to your original question, it was you get in awe of just watching him. you know how good they are, and getting out to play the puck, as a D-man, let's go back, Bennington this weekend, the Four Nations, getting out and playing that puck. It was almost, I didn't care if you could stop the puck, just if you could stop the rim and give it to me so I didn't get my face blown up. That's when I loved you.
Oh, how nice is that? He stops it behind the net. Doesn't matter how he does it. He sets it up 6 inches off the boards, depending on what hand shot you are, and you just make that quick first pass. He's back in the net. He's world. I mean, they're all world class.
But go back to the day when we go back there, they blow us up from behind and put us 6 rows. That was the game. Now, obviously, not as much, but to know that I wasn't going to get blown up in the 6th room, I can go around and pick up that puck in my forehand. It saved a lot of dislocated shoulders, and I had enough concussions, so definitely 1 or 2 concussions.
And anybody can go into the scouting report and find out what the best parts of your game was. But in your mind, what was the best part of your game?
So obviously in the NHL, I was always rated the ugliest and the slowest. So it was my anticipation, and that that's part of my dyslexia is I kind of seeing a 3D image, right? With Tetris. So I kind of knew where the puck was going, before they did, because you can't be that slow and not be okay. And obviously at the end of my career shot blocking, I knew where those lanes were because of my dyslexia and because of my spatial awareness. So it was definitely my anticipation of where the puck was going to be before they put it there.
Is there a goalie that comes to mind that saved you the most shelf life? Like you mentioned, stopping the puck, quick first pass, not getting blown up 6 rows back?
Yeah, Dan Kutcher earlier in my career, Kutch, he'd come out, and play the puck a lot. I never had a Binner or Price on a regular basis. When I was in Vancouver, Felix Potvin or Bob Essens. We got some names: Alex Auld, Hedberg. So it'd be Klutch. I didn't have that massive career saving every single night kind of guy to come out and play the puck.
You played with Roberto Luongo too, right?
Yep.
Not a big puck handler, but as far as a goalie, what did you see that just left you in awe?
It's their position, right? You don't see them moving, right? They always know where to be. It's the athletic one. It's the blocker. It's being able to read the play. Just as a demon needs to be able to read the play and know what's going on. The goalie's probably even more, and how good of a skater they are. It's people always think they play goalie because they can't skate. Oh, and the majority of them are better skaters than all players that are playing out. Besides, Scott Niedermayer or a few guys like that. But it's just the way they worked their edges, the way they knew exactly where to come. Pucks going corner to corner across crease and they'll push off that flexibility. I barely touched my toes, so
a damn cracker.
And then stretched out and be able to hold that post. Legs strong. It's it's pretty impressive and quite crazy to stand there and have me blistering shots all day long. But all respect for them.
When was the last time you were on skates?
I coach. I'm on the ice like a couple hours a week. Coach 4, 5, 6. Little kids. That's
you coaching the grandkids?
Oh, not my grandkids. Just a local rink here in the suburbs of Chicago. I'll go out there and coach. We had my birthday party. We had the family and the grandkids out there. So my body can't handle more than a couple hours a week in skates.
I got 2 more for you. Game 7, overtime. Who are you putting in net of all the goalies you played with? I know you had 1 in net for overtime, but got to pick one.
Got to pick one. I would probably go with Vasilevskiy for his size. Back, the way he plays, the way he can cover that, obviously, and go, Luongo. That's why he was so successful. Got to go with Vasilevskiy. He's played a lot of games in Tampa, but good kid. Love him too.
Blows my mind how he's able to. Like I'm a big guy, right? I'm 6'5", and I'd move anywhere near what Vasilevskiy can do, but just his range and just all the physical attributes he has that a Dustin Wolf has, but in a 6'5" package is insane.
He was always there 2 hours before stretching, and he didn't get that way. Obviously you got to have natural talent, but there's goalies that make themselves look small, and there's goalies that make themselves look big, and he just back in the day when we were playing in Russia, you used to get a breakaway, paddle down, you go to his backhand side, and he'd flip out his little butt end of the stick, and KHL, that's when the lockout, when Ovi was there, Backstrom and Kovalchuk and Matt, he just picked them apart. So it was fun to watch.
Wow. You get any PK Subban stories? That's the last one I got, Dave. I love that smile, by the way, Soaps.
PK was a beauty, right? It's we end up losing to Boston in Game 7. In OT, they went on to win. PK could play the game. If PK, and if PK kept that game more simple, he would have been so much better. He loved Montreal. He'll go behind the net, somebody chase him. He'd do his circle. He wanted to hear the crowd, and obviously he could shoot the puck. But a hell of a player. And I think, what do you have, a 8-year, $80 million deal he's living off of now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's okay. I think he can afford groceries. Inflation isn't hitting him too bad.
Yeah, no, definitely. And he's in the U.S., so he's only taxed to like 42% rather than 52%.
Yeah. Listen, we could do another hour on that. Okay, one more. Only that's visible. I'm a big tattoo guy. Give me quick stories on just the tattoos that we can see on you.
Yeah, they're all 4 Gospels, Adam and Eve. God saved me. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm still here. So that's all that.
Show them up. Show them up real quick.
All right, it's front, both arms, chest, rosary, crossing the back, legs.
Love it, man. Love it.
Had my first son 24. Told my kids, you can have a tattoo, but you can't have anything until you're 25. Because trust me, whatever you like as senior in high school or 19, 20, that Tweety bird in your chest, you're not going to like when you're 40.
Bingo. Couldn't agree with you more, man. That's great advice to close on.
Does it not feel like no tattoos is the new tattoos? Like everybody has tattoos nowadays. I know you're covered in tattoos. I'm au naturel. Nothing there. You don't put bumper stickers on a Ferrari.
That's true. I'm all about shock value. That's when you put something on there for a reason.
How do you think I got him to comment on the Instagram clip and then start the conversation and get him on the show? This is how you do it. In the words of Dire Straits, money for nothing, the chicks for free. Those color TVs and refrigerators.
Wrap us up, Travis Ridgen, and make sure you thank our guest.
Yeah, dude, thanks. I just had a brain fart. I just had a stroke. My God, Soaps, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It was a pleasure, and thanks for being so open and sharing about your journey and your adversity, man.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on there and listening to me blab. I'm sure the listeners are like, all right, get this guy off.
Not a chance. Are you kidding me? All the more information is down below in all of the descriptions of whatever you're listening on or watching on. And I hope if anybody is even having an inkling of anything that you've mentioned, that they reach out to you, because I think you got a lot of the answers, man.
Oh, again, no matter who you are, I have thought, pretty much everything. So no matter if I can help you, please reach out. I always will try and do my best. And, if that's learning disorders, if that's mental health, because I live my own mental health every single day.
And we get a show of hands in the comment section, too. Look at the Sound of Madness music video by Shinedown. Is that not Brent Smith on the other end? Do you not see it? Does anybody see this? Anybody else see this shit? You got a gay son and a stupid son. Dad, look at that. By the way, Soaps, Dave was in the movie Goon, greatest hockey movie of all time.
I can't remember. I don't remember after breakfast. Now I got to go back and watch that.
That's okay. As long as you remember to hit subscribe and like.
Well, anyway, everybody, thank you so much for watching this interview with Brent Sopel. My name's Travis. That's Dave. We do new episodes on Sling the Biscuit every single Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's 10 in the prairies, 9 in the foothills of Alberta, 8 a.m. on the Pacific Northwest. We're on YouTube with the full version of the video show, Spotify, Apple, Rumble as well, Twitter, all the clips on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.